Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Carla with Race to Walk, and I am here with Charlotte Thomason, and we are going to be sharing with you today some of our recommendations for sexual abuse survivors. So, a little bit about this channel. Normally, I do Bible studies and I talk about books on my channel, Walk. And my friend Charlotte has written a book on her experiences as a survivor. And that book came out last year and it's called What Kind of Love Is This? And she was actually my very first person that I interviewed when I started doing live streams, and it was kind of an adventure. And if you'd like to go see that, I will link to it so you can get a little bit more about that. But today we are going to be talking about just other books and things that not only if you personally have experienced abuse, but honestly, these are books that everyone I think should have in their library and to just to read and to educate yourself, because regardless of who you are, I can guarantee you that you know someone who has had maybe not as severe of a situation as Charlotte has, but you know somebody that has experienced abuse. And that abuse, you know, kind of shapes who people are as people. And so that's what some of the books that we're going to be sharing today actually talk about. So, Charlotte, do you want to introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your book?
Sure. So, as Carla said, my name is Charlotte Thomason, and I am 68, or actually, I'll be 69 next month. So, I guess I should officially say 69 uh, years old, and I'm retired. I was a social worker for over 35 years, primarily in the area of foster care and adoption, and I worked both in the public sector and the private sector. So I have that experience. I also was a counselor for a number of years, and I counseled a lot of survivors and people that struggle with addictions and that sort of thing. And my experience, I was severely abused by both of my parents and by other family members and other people as well. And the result of that was a very distorted view of love. But even at a young age, I knew Jesus. And that was really, it was good for me, but it was also confusing because I couldn't understand how Jesus, who supposedly loved me, was allowing everything to happen. And that the things that my parents were telling me was love didn't really match with what I knew about him. And so it was really confusing. But the relationship I had with Jesus really gave me hope throughout my childhood. And I think in my book, I try to share about that. The title comes from uh, 1 John 3, verse 1, which is, "What kind of love is this? See what kind of love this is that the Father has bestowed upon us, because we are his children." And that really stood out because that's really what my struggle was about, was not so much loving God or loving Jesus, but because I did, but really realizing that he loved me. And so that was really what I had to learn to do. And it took like
Mm-hmm.
until my mid 30s, early 40s before I really embraced that. And so my book is about that. It's very raw, it's very real, and I talk about the abuse. I wrote it from the perspective of the age that I was for each whatever thing that was happening. But it's also that I think the maybe the unique thing about it is that it's written as a story that I'm telling my granddaughter, who is an adult. And so those conversations, because she literally did come over to my apartment, she sat on the couch that's right behind me, and she did that over several months. And I would share part of my story, and she would ask me questions, and I've interwoven some of those conversations in the book to answer questions that the reader might have. And so I think that kind of helps the reader answer those questions. It gives the reader a break from what the abuse was, and then I also interject some letters that I wrote to my younger self, and I interject some sonnets that I wrote at strategic points as kind of chapters or section breaks. So that it's really just a lot about that. But the main thing is that it's I want to give survivors or those that help them hope that there is something better. So that's
Yeah, and those little the sonnets and the letters, they do actually help the reader get through it. I mentioned this in the original video or interview that I did with Charlotte. It was really difficult for me to get through it, and the only really the way that I could get through it was that I knew Charlotte and I knew it had a good ending. So, but if I had known that ahead of time, it would have been even more difficult, I think, to get through it. She did, so we're streaming to several different locations today. And if you have a comment or any feedback, just go ahead and type it in either in the little live chat or in the comments, depending on where you're at. But just so you're aware, when you make a comment, and there's a delay between when you type it and when we see it. So if you have a question or a comment and you feel like you need to wait for a break, like if we were, in person and having a conversation, just go ahead and type it now, and we will make a note of it and respond to it a little bit later, because it's going to take just a little bit for it to get to us. So she actually, now one of the places we're streaming is on Amazon Live, and so if you aren't there, I do have a link in the description of the video to a list of the books I'm going to be talking about today. But if you are on Amazon Live, it's super convenient because you can just look down in the carousel down below and you will see the book that we're talking about highlighted as we're talking about it. But the book just recently came out in the audiobook version. And so if you are an audiobook person, that format is available to you. I have a copy of that, and I think that the narrator did just a wonderful job, a really good job. When Charlotte was telling me it was coming out on audio, I was almost thinking, okay, so how is it's audio may be a little intense, I think, but the narrator did a great job, and I think you made a really good choice on that person, Charlotte. It was really good, but
yeah, she was really good. Yeah. She
yeah.
struggled though. She really did. It was hard. She admitted that it was very difficult. And it took her quite a while to do it because obviously it's a difficult thing to do, but she was really very good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought.
I mean, it was hard just reading it. I mean, I
Yeah.
had to take
Yeah. I
breaks,
can't
and it
imagine.
was,
Yeah. Mm-mm.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I just, yeah, so this is one of the things about the books that we selected. In the past year, I've done quite a few interviews with authors of books on this topic, and there are some books that I read that I haven't done reviews on or done videos on. Um, and part of the reason is I wanted to highlight books that were encouraging and that weren't that if someone that has been through this something like this, that it can give you hope that things can be different, that you can see people who have been in the same place that you are and who have come through it. They've come out the other side. So Charlotte, you had mentioned that when you were researching your books, right, or researching for your
Mm-hmm.
book, that a lot of them not glorified it, but the way they
Yeah, they're
related, it
just
was,
they're very graphic. A lot of them are, which, people write what they feel is what they need to write. And I'm not in any way putting that down. But as I was researching what other memoirs about child abuse, some of them, it seemed like it was more about the pain and what happened to them. And there wasn't a lot of hope in the writing, even towards the end, there wasn't. And I think what's important when survivors are trying to decide what books they want to read, I would just highly recommend that they read the reviews to see what people are saying about it. And even if it has very, very high ratings and maybe even a bestseller, to really look at the reviews, because it could be the reviews are great because there's people that are reading it that like to read all the blood and gore, right? And so, and not so much that, and that's fine if that's, you like that kind of book. I don't particularly, but some people do. But if you're a survivor, just because a book is very highly rated, or even that it's a bestseller, doesn't necessarily mean it's a good book for you to read. And I think that's why one of the reasons I was kind of excited that we were doing this today, because I think it's important to help to have survivors, and even not just survivors, but people that help them, like pastors and social workers and people in mental health, and even friends and family, because it's really important that you are selective about what you decide to read. Because if you read something that's just about the pain, that's just about what happened and the anger and the, all of that, and there's no hope, then it's really not going to be helpful to you. It really isn't. You're going to be left most likely feeling worse. And at the worst case scenario, you could have a major breakdown because it's so triggering. So it's really just very important that you are cautious about that.
So Charlotte actually has an amazing book trailer for her book, and she's done quite a few different interviews on different channels and podcasts and several radio stations and TV stations. And I thought it was kind of cool that one of the TV interviews that they did, they just ran your book trailer.
Yeah, and they didn't tell me they were going to do that until we were live. I was like, okay. Because it's emotional, and I didn't realize that. And so I was like, okay, what video are you playing? you know? And they played it, and I was just like, I mean, I had to collect myself for a couple of seconds when we went back live, because I was like, oh my goodness, this is just hard. Yeah. So, because I hadn't seen it in months, right? And so
you put it out there, and then you kind of forget, right?
You do. And then they just showed it, and I'm like, well, this is cool, but I would have liked some notice on that. So, but anyway, that was kind of an experience. Yeah. Okay.
So we're gonna play her trailer, and she knew this ahead of time. So
yes, I did. I knew. In fact, I just asked you if you were going to do it. So
Okay, here we go.
In a few minutes, my granddaughter will arrive. Will she still love me when she hears all the things that happened to me? Will she even believe me? She's here. There's no turning back now. My Uncle Ray and my dad told me I was a special girl, but I had no idea what being a special girl meant. What they did to me made me feel dirty, and I wanted to hide from them. My Sunday school teacher told me I was special because Jesus loved me. I wondered, if Jesus loved me, why didn't he rescue me? Where was he? My dad told me no one would love me like he did. How could Jesus love me? I was a bad girl. College brought me some relief because I didn't remember what my dad did to me. Well, in my mind, I didn't remember. But I knew things about being with men, and I hated who I'd become. I begged God to help me. How could God love me? I must be evil. Years later, I looked down at the perfect face of my newborn daughter, and I wondered, how could I create such a beautiful, perfect person? I was overwhelmed by a feeling that I'd never experienced. Is this what love feels like? Is this how God loves me? I felt dizzy and fear gripped me as darkness surrounded me. I saw a man holding an infant. When I woke, the nurses brought my daughter back to me. I looked at her tiny face and I vowed that she would know the kind of love I longed for. She would know that God loved her. Maybe God would love me if I could show my daughter the love I felt in that moment. The first glimpse of love, a flash of memory, and a new resolve was the beginning of my journey through the darkness to discover the truth about my life and the truth about unconditional love. And maybe those who read my story will experience the hope I found on that journey.
Well, that was awesome. So that's a little bit of a preview, and I hope that you pick up the book. And that again, that's What Kind of Love Is This by Charlotte Thomason. And today we're talking about our 10 books recommended for sexual abuse survivors. So, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, it isn't just for survivors, just because it's so prevalent in our society that it is very likely that you know many people that have been through this, and it's important to understand that situation so you can see where they're coming from. So we're going to move into the next book that we're going to be talking about. So this is number 2. This is a book that Charlotte actually quotes in her own book, and this is the Body Keeps Score, and this is by Bessel van der Kolk. And I bought this book actually I think it was last year, but I haven't read it. But you've read parts of it and used parts of it, haven't you, Charlotte? You want to explain a little bit about it?
Yeah, I've read probably about half of it, and then I've used it in essays and read a lot of articles about it, and recently actually just edited content edited an article for the Unexpected Journal that focuses on references that book a lot. And so the book was really validating to me about the mind-body connection, because the author, it's primarily about PTSD with veterans, but it definitely applies to any kind of post-traumatic stress disorder that anybody would experience. And for me, what was helpful was he makes the connection that when something traumatic happens to us, there's literally a memory stored in our bodies. It's not just a mental memory. And even if we don't consciously remember the event, our body remembers it. Our body remembers what happened to us. And so if something occurs that triggers that body memory, literally, the person really re-experiences the event physically. And that can be very frightening to someone who, like me, forgets and blocks the memories of the actual abuse, because things happened in my body that did not make sense with what I consciously remembered. And so it's just very well written. He is a doctor, a medical doctor, psychologist, psychiatrist, but it's in very, I guess what you'd call popular language. It's very easy to read. It's very understandable. He tells stories. He talks about some of his patients and how he came to understand that connection. So I highly recommend it for anyone that is healing from sexual trauma, because it will help what's happening in your body make sense, is really the biggest takeaway I got from it.
Now, since in this, I've kind of been especially when we were talking about like how to address it, how to handle it, how to respond to it. The people that are come to with the stories. And uh, I was just kind of wondering, who do you, now I don't have this on us today because I haven't read her books, but um, kind of the person that is, I would say, is the leading person speaking about this, Diane Langberg. And she has specifically addresses abuses in church. And she said that when she first started having people come to her, I want to say I saw an interview where she said her first patient, she's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I can't remember which one, but I think it was a pastor's wife, and she was just talking about the fear that this woman had just interacting with people. And she said it was post-traumatic stress was new. Like it hadn't, when she started, it wasn't even a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she said it was like there was nothing, there was no resources, no data. She
Right.
had to like
Exactly.
figure out a way to help this woman.
Right.
And she said the closest thing she could come to that was any other journals or information were people that were treating Holocaust survivors. And that
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Well, that
the
makes
closest
sense.
thing.
Yeah.
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 But
That makes
I
sense.
wanted to say, when we were talking about this, I actually, for a couple of years, I volunteered in a prayer ministry, and they primarily prayed for healing. And that, I haven't read this book, but it lines exactly up with what we learned in that. The training for prayer is that when we would, what they said was, you go through a traumatic situation, usually between 6 to 18 months after that, it's not unusual to develop some sort of health condition
Yes,
because bodies
absolutely.
react to
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And
Yep. Yep.
so when we would meet with someone, I mean, that they were always focusing on praying, ask Holy Spirit for guidance, like how the questions to ask and how to pray. But they said the biggest thing is to forgive, right? To forgive. um Identify, it's important to identify what it is, and then be able to release that person. And I know that's a hard thing, and I know that if somebody's watching this, they may not hear that, and that may be upset and a little angry. So I would just say, just keep that in the back of your mind, and maybe talk to God about it a little bit. And Charlotte, do you want to talk a little bit about that? You had to go through
Yeah, I could.
layers
Yeah,
of.
because when you were saying that, I was like, yeah. So the thing that I think is important as far as forgiveness is that most people have a little bit of a disconnect on what forgiveness really means, right? And I think the important thing about forgiveness, particularly for survivors, is before you can forgive someone, you have to have someone in your life that you can share your emotions about what happened to you with, honestly and directly, your anger, your frustration, your hurt, your sorrow, all of those things. You have to have someone that helps you go through that process before forgiveness is even a remote possibility, because that's something for you. And I think that when you get to the place that you've done those things, then forgiveness is not saying what that person did was okay. What forgiveness is you're letting them off of your hook and putting them on God's. And it's really
Mhm.
letting go of the need for revenge, for, it's letting go of the bitterness and the anger, and just saying, I'm not going to let, and this is a cliche phrase, but it really fits in this situation. I'm not going to let that person park in my head for free anymore, because, I'm not, they hurt me, they controlled me, they did all these things. And anyway, if it was child abuse, you didn't have really a choice. But I do have a choice now, and I can let that go, and
Mhm.
I can just turn them over to God and say, you do what you do. And then I didn't have to hold on to that anymore. And when you get to the place where you have, done the anger work and all of those things, that is very freeing. And it is a substantial part of letting go of a lot of the tension in your body, uh, the anger and the bitterness. And so, yeah, it's an essential piece, but it's not something you can do right away. So I think that's an important piece too, is that you have to be working with someone to help you get to the place. And, yeah, you can get through all the stuff and you can function without forgiveness, but forgiveness really does free you up in a way that really nothing else does. It's kind of like the icing on the cake in terms of healing, because you're letting that person go and you're letting their control go out of your life. So,
Yeah, and I think that this book, The Body Keeps Score, it it's not just about your feelings, but it's also about your
mm-mm.
health. So
Yes, it's about
so
your
it's
health.
going
Exactly.
yeah, so
Yes.
it's not
Yeah,
just in your head that when
exactly.
it maybe you're not to the point where you can think about that right now, but it's something that should be on your list as you're w- working out a plan for healing.
hmm
Just be
Because,
aware of it.
yeah, exactly. Because all of those things affect your body physically. I mean, it really does. And
Hmm.
it will stay there until you have some resolution. So, yeah. It's really a good book for that. Absolutely.
Okay. So the next book that we're talking about is, and this is number 3 on our list of the top books that sexual abuse survivors should read, and those who are, want to be able to be advocates and good friends to people who have been through this is, let me see, it's The Courage to Heal, and this is a guide for women survivors of child sexual abuse by Ellen Bass and Laura Davis. This was one that Charlotte recommended. Now, I do just want to say that this book, I guess, is specifically designed for women, but just know that we completely recognize that this is not a problem that's exclusive to women, that men experience this too. And so, anyway, Charlotte, do you want to share why
Yeah.
this book was helpful for you?
Yeah, and I think it's important too is that the authors do have a book that's specifically designed for men as well now. That came
Okay.
out a number of years ago, but yeah, they do have one for men. So just if you're a male survivor of sexual abuse, there is a book that is specifically geared towards your needs. This
Mm-hmm.
book was just, I mean, it had not been out for very long when I first started my healing process, and I think that uh, it just was it's written literally with the survivor in mind. It's written so that uh, it's a workbook. It's really big. It's thick, but it's a workbook, and it helps guide you through all the different stages of healing. There's or not testimonies really, but examples of people sharing their stories of different aspects of what happens,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of my lifeline when I first started my healing process. And like you said about the individuals you were talking about, when I first started healing, it was PTSD was a brand new diagnosis, and people did
Mm-hmm.
not know very much about it, and that made counseling very difficult for me because people just did not understand flashbacks and dissociation and all of those things that are such an integral part. And the authors of this book just have some incredible insight, and just were able to, they ask questions for you to think about. There's little sections of stories, and it just is, even now it's still one of the go-to books that counselors and therapists recommend for survivors, just because it is so chock full of valuable information and it's very user friendly. And so yeah, it's a great resource. for survivors. Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. Well, the next book, we're going to go to number 4, and this is a book. It's called Reclaimed and Overcome Trauma and Gain Health, or Overcome Trauma and Gain Healthy Control of Your Life. And this is by Shannon McGraw. And Shannon is someone who lives here locally. She actually used to be my neighbor, and she has written several books. And the first one that she wrote was about her experience as a sexual abuse survivor. And did an interview with her actually earlier this year. She was my second ever interview. I started with my friends; they were my guinea pigs. But she talks about. I'm going to play a little clip from that interview about why she wrote the book. So we're going to go to that right now.
What I called it my conversion moment. I was 27. I'd always believed in God, known God, but I'd been through so much. And when we have gone through such major traumas, especially child abuse or sexual trauma, it can affect, how we react in life and how we respond in different ways. And so was very angry and walked away from my faith. And so it wasn't until I was 27 that I found myself in a place that I had opened myself up and God was able to come in. And I share that whole story in writing in that first book, Exposed. But when I had that moment, and it was a moment of dying to myself, because I didn't want to be angry anymore. I didn't want to be that person. I was just very, very angry. And I asked God, take my life or do something with it. If you have something for me, then do something with it. And he called me to help youth. I knew how I felt when I was a teenager and how frustrated and I was not able to speak about what was going on because I don't think I knew even how to voice what was happening within me. And so I started working as a youth minister. And the more I was working with youth and sharing parts of my story, I knew that I needed to really get it out and start writing about it, because not only, and then, more places started asking me to come speak and come speak to their churches or speak at different conferences. And the more I was speaking with the youth, it was their parents, it was their chaperones, it was their youth ministers, their ministers coming to me saying, you're telling my story and I've never told anybody. And so that's when I really knew, okay, you know what? Maybe God's not calling everybody to share everything to the world, but I felt like it was a call for me that I needed to go ahead and share what had happened and what I had been through in order to help others feel like they're not alone and for them to know their worth and to know how it is to get on that healing journey.
So that was a little bit about her story, about why she started writing her story. She also started a ministry, a peer counseling ministry, and that is called Hopeful Hearts. I think I should have looked this up. I think the website is hopefulhearts.org, or maybe it's hopefulheartsministry.org. But the peer support they have, they work in tandem with they like to work tandem with counselors or counselors. All their peer support counselors have gone through training far enough in their healing journey that they are able to help others. So that's a little bit about her story. Her first 2 books, I think the first one is Redeemed, the second one is Exposed, and then this one is Reclaimed. The first 2 are her stories about, the first 2 books are her stories about, her life experiences. Redeemed is her early life, and then Exposed is how some of that trauma played a role in her marriage and her life and how she was parenting, and so she talks about that. And then this book, Reclaimed. I'm confused. This book, Reclaimed, is really kind of a workbook, like walking through the steps. And she integrates scripture quite, and I really appreciated how she kind of brought some of those verses to life. Like, sometimes we read the Bible, and I don't know that we necessarily think about it as this is God's word to us to help us have a life of freedom, to help us live a life of joy, right? John 10:10, it said this: the enemy does not come except to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And so she works in that, so we can. I think sometimes there's a lot of self-help books, and it's like this 90-minute fix. So you read a book and it's fixed and done. And I think if you have that expectation, you're going to be disappointed and feel like there's something wrong with you. No, there's not something with you. There was something wrong with the person who abused you, and your healing process is going to be longer than probably you would like. And that's reality. But if you don't have realistic expectations about what you can expect, I think that it's really easy to get discouraged and think that it's just always going to be that way. Charlotte, can you share a little bit about, okay, first of all, let me ask, are you okay with like time? Because we were talking about an hour, and are you okay if we go
Yeah,
over an
I'm
hour?
fine. I'm totally fine. Yeah.
Because I'd like you to share a little bit about where you were before you really started working on your healing and where you are now.
It's really night and day for sure. Well, I was 34 before I started remembering what had happened to me. And so I think that at that age, I mean, I had a flashback when I had my daughter, but I really didn't understand it. And I think throughout, before I really started working on my healing, there were things in my life that just did not make sense. And that goes back to the mind body connection, where I had things happen in my body when I'd be in certain places or around certain people. And it just did not make sense at all. I'd feel sick in my stomach. I'd have pain in my abdomen. And it just was really, and I had migraines, like a lot of migraines. And so, but when I started my healing process, things kind of got worse before they got better. But part of that was because I pushed myself harder than was healthy for me, because I wanted to be done. And I think that is sometimes for survivors, that's a temptation, is that you want to be done with it because it's so painful and you just want to rush through it. And so I really pushed myself. And so I really, that was not a good thing. So I do not recommend that for anybody. But yeah, I was, oh geez.
So
well, my granddaughter says, so that was your cray period. And, and not to be derogatory or anything, but I really was not very functional. I during my healing process, one of my diagnoses is borderline personality disorder. And my therapist said I was a nice borderline, which I'm not really sure what that meant, other than I didn't do a lot of self-harm. I did some, but having a healthy relationship or even maintaining a relationship of any kind is very difficult when that is part of your diagnosis. And so I was emotionally unavailable for my daughter during her teenage years. I was having flashbacks nearly all the time. I mean, multiple times a day. I was angry. I was bitter, and I functioned, but there was a whole year that I really could not function at all. And I was on disability, Social Security disability. I was in a hospital setting for a daycare, kind of a day program, for a year. And so it was very difficult. But now I'm very content, and I'm functional. Even my daughter says, "You're really kinder, Mom," which, I take that as a compliment, because she's lived through all the worst of it. But even with that, she's told me and others many times that even through all of that, with me being emotionally distant from her, or not really being able to set the kind of boundaries that she needed as a teenager, one of the things that she's always said is that she felt loved. She knew she was loved. And so I think, and I did instill in her, like in the trailer, it says, I did instill in her a love of God. And that's something that I really feel like God helped me do. And so it was through a combination of really good counseling and some not so good counseling, but some good counseling, and combining that with biblical truths and understand and really ultimately the thing that shifted my healing for me was when I finally fully embraced that God's unconditional love, that I didn't have to earn it. Because my whole life I was thinking, okay, well, if I screw up, I'm going to hell, and he can't possibly love me with all the stuff that's happened to me and all the stuff that I've done. And it was really a shift that happened for me pretty late in my healing process, actually. And it was that shift in that mindset that really kind of turned things in a different direction for me. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. And so if you're just joining us, we're doing our top 10 books for sexual abuse survivors. Charlotte's written a book called What Kind of Love Is This? And so we're down on number 4, which is Reclaimed by Shannon McGraw. And this is a book that's kind of more of a workbook. And a lot of what she says ties in exactly with what you've been saying. And I have a clip here where she's talking about being free, like how she got to that place. And so I'm going to play that clip right now.
I don't want to put oranges and apples of what is the worst abuse or that kind of thing, or how often you were abused or who abused you. It's all bad. If it's affected your soul, if it's affected who you are, it's a bad thing and it's sad. And, I think it is about us beginning to learn, how can we come through this? What steps do we need to take to be able to be free and to not feel as if somebody has taken that freedom of what God can give us away.
So that was from an interview I did with her in April of last year. So we're going to go down to the next one. So this is where we've been at so far. Our first book that we recommended was Charlotte's What Kind of Love Is This? And this came out last year, and the audiobook version just came out. The second book is The Body Keeps Score. We talked quite a bit about how trauma actually affects you physically. So it's not, the mind and body aren't separate, they're connected. The third book is The Courage to Heal. It really helped Charlotte in her healing journey. And then the fourth book was that we just heard by Shannon McGraw, which is her kind of like step-by-step process of going through healing. It's that they use in their peer support ministry, which is Hopeful Heart Ministry. And then our fifth book that we're going to move on to right now is maybe that you might be familiar with, and that is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Now, this is a book that I don't care who you are, you should probably get this, or I don't know, I guess there could be people that don't have any problem boundaries at all, but I don't know. I mean, I think a lot.
I don't think so.
Do. It's just.
I think everybody has some issues with it. I really do. I mean, I think if you think you don't, you probably are
fooling
incorrect.
Yourself.
Yeah, you're fooling yourself. Exactly. So, yeah.
So this is, I've read this book several times, and sometimes I have recently. I should probably go back and read it again, because let me tell you, the past few days have not gone the way I expected them to go. I had plans, and those plans are kind of blown up, and I probably should be using some better boundaries so I can have a better handle of my time. But anyway, Charlotte, you want to talk about what you find useful out of this book?
Yeah, it's been a very long time since I read the book, like probably 30 years, but I don't even know if it was out that long ago, but it was a really long time ago that I read it. But Boundaries, I think the thing that I like about this particular book is that the authors bring in the Christian component to it. And I think that, again, is a really essential part. Now, if you're not a believer, I would just suggest that you consider that as a possibility in your healing process, because for me, and I think for uh, a lot of people, it is an integral part of having a total healing experience. So, having said that, that's one of the things that I really liked about this book, is that it does include that component and that perspective in the discussion of boundaries. But boundaries are just such a vital part of having healthy relationships. And boundaries are, there's internal boundaries and there's external boundaries. And internal boundaries of what you allow in, and external boundaries are kind of, well, I mean, I can't remember, I may have that mixed up, but anyway, one is what you allow in, and the other is, what you do outwardly, what you actually, whether you invade someone's space or that kind of thing. And it's the actual, internal is more your thought process, where external is really the outward expression. And so I think it's important, because we don't really, codependency, enmeshment, those kinds of things, which are terms that you may not understand, but they're pretty common terms anymore. But, codependency is where there's a relationship where one person is literally enabling another person to stay in an unhealthy habit. That happens a lot in addictive homes, where one person is an addict and the other person tries to do things to be sure everything's okay for that person, so they don't act out. And in essence, that's not what you should do. Every person has their own responsibility. So that's kind of one example. And then the enmeshment is where you literally can't tell where one person ends and the other person starts. And so that's a very blurred boundary where, for example, and I had this issue with a number of people, but particularly with my first husband, that it was kind of a fear response more than anything. But how I felt emotionally could change in an instant. If I was very happy and content and having a great conversation with a friend, and I would walk into the house and Marty was upset or angry about something, my mood would immediately change, and I would take on what he was feeling. And so, and everything I did was to keep him happy. And if he was upset, then I was upset. And you couldn't really tell the difference. And my identity was so tied up in that I really kind of lost myself. And so boundaries and understanding boundaries, those are kind of the extreme examples. But the book goes into all of that, and it brings in the Christian perspective. And and Dr. Cloud has an Instagram account.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I follow him, and he's very casual. I mean, he doesn't even try to be like, he sits there and it's like a conversation, and it's really great. So I would highly recommend that as well. I'll have to
check that out.
Because it's almost like sometimes he actually posts a couple of times a day. I mean, he's like really into it. He likes it. Yeah, it's pretty fun. And I think it's at Dr. Henry Cloud actually is his handle. I think, I'm not positive on that, but I think. And so so that's been kind of fun, right? Because they're just I mean, he just does these little short videos and talks about, and sometimes, he have his glasses on, sometimes he doesn't because he can't get the lighting right. And so he'll just take them off, So, I mean, he's just very much like he's in your living room chatting with you. And so I think that says a lot. So I think that's another kind of push or plus for the book, is that the author is willing to be really genuine and real like that. So, yeah.
So Charlotte's she has a YouTube channel. Is it Charlotte B. Thomas? I always try to put your middle initial in there. Is it on your YouTube channel, or is it just Charlotte Thomason?
It's Charlotte Thomason. It's actually Charlotte Thomason 1953 is the official ending of my channel, because I had to put a number on it to get the the unique URL. But I finally got enough followers or subscribers that I could do a unique one. So it's Charlotte Thomason 1953 is what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, she's on social media. She's very consistent. She has like a little chats, and she does once a month. She has a live stream. So anyway, so she does that as well. But just going back to boundaries, I think we again, this is a book everybody should read because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not just it doesn't just have to do with um, survivors that have had some broken boundaries. I think you can see that in the workplace all the time, like improper boundaries, unrealistic
Mm.
expectations. You see people in jobs that they're their managers push boundaries all the time, and I don't know if I don't know how, I can't remember if he talks about that, but I think it's important to recognize what boundaries are because if you don't know what is, especially if you've been in a dysfunctional situation, you don't know what normal is. And so you need somebody to say, okay, this is abusive, this isn't acceptable, this isn't right, this is the way things should be, so you can be able to start standing against those things. I remember this one time my daughter and I were giving a ride to she's probably in her early 20s to this young lady that we were taking her to her aunt, and she was telling us a story about the relationship that there had been this event, and she's like, yeah, he tried to stab me, and I'm like, okay, so that's just a
Mm-hmm.
no. That's a
Mm-hmm.
no. That's a big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
You walk
Yeah,
out and don't look
exactly.
back on that. But also there were some other things. There were some other things that he was doing, and I'm like, well, that's abuse. That's not
Mm-hmm.
that's not
Yeah, exactly.
acceptable
And that's,
behavior.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
if you don't have
boundaries
somebody
are,
in yes, if you don't have somebody in your life that will tell you that, get this book and then start looking for people who will help you develop better boundaries. And
mm-hmm.
honestly, sometimes it's a little hard. If you've had really mushy boundaries all this time, it can be uh, maybe sometimes you might get your feelings hurt because somebody tells you or you know has boundaries for you, but that's how you start how to learn. It's not a reason to take offense. It's just
Yeah, it's
you need
just setting limits, basically, is what it is.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next book we're going to go to is um, Life's Healing Choices, and this is by John Baker. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about why this is on your list of topics for survivors?
Yeah. John Baker was the founder of the Celebrate Recovery program. He passed away last year. But his son and daughter-in-law have taken over running the ministry. And, it's really interesting because I didn't realize it, but I probably was at one of the first places that John and Cheryl Baker came to speak, because back in 1992, I was attending a church in Austin, and they spoke about Celebrate Recovery, and it was brand new. It really had just started. And the thing that struck me about it was that it really took the 12 steps and added the Christian component, right? And it added uh, that aspect to recovery. And at that time in my life, I was really struggling with my sexual addiction, and I was really struggling with how to control it, because the internet had arrived, and that was not a good thing for me at time in my life. And so that really that was how I was first introduced to Celebrate Recovery. And it took a while, but I actually did go through their step study, and it was just very impactful to me at the time because it gave me some tools, and I'm all about tools and, really wanting to do things in a concrete manner. And it was really good because it had the Christian component. And one of the things that's in the program is they have 8 principles. In addition to the 12 steps, they utilize 8 principles, which are based on the Beatitudes. And that's what this book is about. This book is about that. And that's Life's Liberating Choices. It's structured in such a way that it goes over each of those 8 principles, and each chapter is has a discussion about it and the choice, what the choice is, maybe what caused it, what the result is. And then there's action steps in each chapter of what you can do. And then
Okay.
there's also, for each chapter, there's 2 testimonies from individuals regarding that particular choice, because that's a really important aspect. And over the last couple of years, my dear friend Cheryl Luke is the National Director for Cultural Communities for Celebrate Recovery. And my friendship with her has really helped me have an even greater appreciation for Celebrate Recovery and all that they stand for. And it has grown so much since I went through it back in the early 90s. And it just, this book it just gives you hope and inspiration, and it gives you another tool to help you on your recovery, because for trauma survivors, addictions are very common because we learned that's one of the ways we cope with the stress and the memories and all of that, is that's our self-soothing. And so I think this is a really good book for someone who just wants to maybe doesn't have access to a CR group or something like that, and can actually benefit from this particular aspect of the Celebrate Recovery program.
So as you were talking, the thought came to me, I think sometimes, okay, if you read Charlotte's book, you may say, oh my goodness, and it's a very extreme story. And so not everybody's situation is like that. But I think sometimes we dismiss how harmful some more acceptable forms of abuse are, like emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, things like that. And so even if you haven't gone through a form of physical abuse or things that, there are, that are crimes, you can still be experiencing trauma and the impact of that trauma in your life. It just might be less likely to realize it. So, would this be, do you think that the book, Life's Choices, would be helpful in those kinds of circumstances too?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, absolutely. Because basically it helps you kind of reclaim your life in the sense of taking responsibility and having accountability and realizing that you do have a choice. And I think that's something that any kind of abuse kind of makes you think you don't have. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, this is number 7 on our list of 10 books that survivors should read. Sorry, it's not showing here. Okay, it is a 365 daily devotional by Celebrate Recovery. And you may see that this Celebrate Recovery comes up quite a bit in our discussion today. And I have to share, when we get to the next book, I'll tell you that there's a connection with Celebrate Recovery there too. But do you want to share why you recommend this one, Cheryl?
Well,
Charlotte?
I recommend this one because it's, devotional, daily devotionals are, at least for me in my healing, even in the early days, were something that really kept me or got me going in the morning. And I think this book is specifically geared to anyone who is, Celebrate Recovery calls them hangups, hurts, and habits, right? Which we all have. And so this is geared specifically to helping you or to giving you inspiration every day in those particular things. And what I've found with the devotionals that I read every day is, like, some days it's like, okay, God, yeah, I hear you, because it's specific to exactly what I'm struggling with that day. And I think that any kind of a daily devotional is really a good thing. And I think for those survivors, or that this is a good resource for that. And I would encourage you to consider getting that because of that.
I think too is that when you're in the other thing about devotionals is I don't always use devotionals. Just sometimes I do it on topics, because usually, like, when I just read the Bible. But the thing about devotional is when you're in a period of severe stress, it's really hard for your brain to be working the way it should.
Yep.
You're going
Exactly.
along certain tracks, your brain's going along certain tracks, and it's really hard to get out of it. Also, just medication. When I had my gallbladder out, they put me under anesthesia. My brain, it literally took me almost 2 months before my brain was working again. Like normally, all these thoughts are coming up, and it was almost a little scary. It was a little flat. I actually were in a group, and I asked that I need some prayer. I can't think. I can't think. And luckily, this happened in the summer, and I had 2 months before I was going into my last semester at the apologetics. But Rebecca, Valerius actually said that the anesthesia. It's just going to take some time to get out of your system. But if you're on any sort of medication, maybe the devotionals help you. Somebody walking along with you through something and help you maybe see things in a different way.
Yeah. It helps you focus, right? If you've got a brain fog for whatever reason, it helps you focus. Yep.
Yeah, especially in this time right now with COVID. I mean, that's like that's a symptom of COVID and long COVID too. And just FYI, I don't know what it's going to be called yet, but Charlotte is working on a devotional book right now, right?
Yes, I am. I'm hoping that it will be out by the end of the year. Yeah. And it's, I'm doing that. That's my project for this year is a devotional. Yep.
Yeah. So you have to go to her website. I actually let me go to my little things here. If you go to her website at charlottethomason.com, she has a newsletter and you can sign up for it. And then you would know when these things come out. So anyway, let's go back to our list. Now, the next one is another book that I did an interview with the author, and that is Preyed Upon, Breaking Free from Therapist Abuse. And this is by a lady named Amy Nordhus. Now, she actually, this is part of, before I play the little intro that was from her interview, before we talk a little bit about it, she actually is kind of all launched. She was in Celebrate Recovery. Do you want to share what Celebrate Recovery is, in case people aren't familiar with it?
Well, like I said before, Celebrate Recovery has its foundation. I mean, it is a 12-step program, but it is so much more now. It's a ministry, and they have a step study. They have outreach. They have it's church-based, and its headquarters is in California, and the church that sponsors it is Saddleback Church in California. And it really just takes the 12 steps to a different level because it does incorporate God into it. And so it's different in the sense of other traditional 12-step programs where your higher power can pretty much be anything, to making it focused on God or that is the source. And I think one of the things that I really like about it is for each of the 12 steps, there's a scripture. They incorporate a scripture associated with each step, which that was the thing that really kind of drew me to it, because it really helps you make the connection between what you're doing psychologically with what the word says. And so to me, that is one of the key features that was significant to me and drew me to it, because I just was like, okay, well, this is biblical, because this is what it says in the Bible. And so it really makes that connection very, very well. So I think, if your church doesn't have a Celebrate Recovery program, then, maybe talk to your pastor, whoever's in charge of that kind of thing, and see what it would take to get one started, because they have conferences and all kinds of activities throughout the year. So it's just a very excellent resource.
So I've heard multiple sexual abuse survivors going to Celebrate Recovery. Is it also for addictions? Like what type
Oh,
of?
and it is for addictions. It
Okay.
is for addictions. It's called hab. I mean, like the references that are the terms they use is hurt anybody that struggles with hurts, hangups, or habits, which is pretty much everybody, right? So it's for anybody
Okay.
that's struggling with anything that's really disrupting their lives. So I think, and just a little plug, my Chatting with Charlotte live stream in March, my guest is going to be Cheryl Luke, who, like I said before, is the national director for cultural communities for Celebrate Recovery. And we're going to talk about Celebrate Recovery and how addiction is often a result, is one of the results of childhood trauma. And so that'll be on March 12th at 11 o'clock on my YouTube channel. And it'll be live streamed on there and a couple of other places. So you can watch out for that too. But yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, like I said, he been through quite a bit of abuse. I did an interview with her. I think this is in November. So I just have a couple clips from her. But first, we're going to just watch a little trailer so you can kind of get an idea what the book is about. So that's a trailer for Preyed Upon by Amy Northhughes. And the story was that she had been through multiple abusive situations. And she kind of, it's a really interesting story. She kind of had she lost a family member and what started to go into downward spiral. And she got in a Celebrate Recovery group and started healing. And then she had, there's more to the story, but anyway, she was recommended to this therapist who was a deacon in her church and who was a Christian counselor. And so she goes to him, and it's a story. It's a real story, but he groomed her. Sorry, I hit my mouse and it went off again. So he was grooming her, and it was this long, very long, just you just have to read the book. But she does a really good job of explaining how it happened. And so I'm going to say about what she, part of the way that he roped her in was her connection to God, because she had been in church her whole life, but she had just recently um, really come to know God as as her father, as in a relationship. She had said, like, before it was like black and white, and it was like going in color. That was where she was in her Christian walk, and he connected with her in that way, and then he manipulated her. So this is a little bit about what that experience was like.
Some of the experiences that I was having in therapy with him were really powerful. I thought really powerful, spiritual, real experiences. And it was hard to separate him from that.
Yeah.
And there were times when I thought maybe he was up to no good, but then I felt like to criticize him was criticizing the Holy Spirit in the process. I could not untangle where God was and where he was in the situation.
So one of the themes you'll see that comes up repeatedly in at least the books that like Charlotte, Shannon, and Amy, it's how important, like, you're knowing who you are, not only just like who you think you are, but who you are in Christ. And your when you've been through trauma, that's damaged. And so this was a situation where somebody that was supposed to be helping her through it was actually making it worse. It's quite a story. Like I said, I did an interview with her last November, and you can read the book too. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight here is that sometimes I think maybe people might think, okay, well, I just let myself get into this. I was stupid for getting into the situation. It's, blaming yourself for, this situation. And I'm going to play this clip because she actually had a background in criminology and psychology. She was not an educated person. And so it really can happen to anyone. And so I'm just going to play this next clip. The other thing that I thought was really interesting when I read your bio was that you actually have a background in criminology and psychology. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is so helpful about your book is that, one, it's so honest about what happens, but you paint such a clear picture of how that grooming process happens. And I think people may think that, it only happens to people who are unaware. And, that wasn't you. I mean, you actually have education in that area, right?
Yes. And I would say also that I have very good intuition. In fact, my intuition was spot on with him 7 years prior. It didn't take me but a couple sessions to realize that this wasn't right, and I left. It was that my low self-esteem that allowed me to trust other people's opinions above my own and other people's judgment over my own, such as my pastor and his wife and different friends in the community, and that belief that a doctor couldn't be in the wrong, could he? Or an elder wouldn't be in the wrong. And so it was me setting my own judgment aside and trusting other people, because I just didn't think that I was valuable enough for my opinion to matter.
Yeah, and at the end of the book, I didn't include this clip, but at the end, throughout the book, she talks about lies that she believed that kind of facilitated opportunities for that people were able to take advantage of her because she believed things that weren't true about herself. And then at the end of the book, she has like these new rules, these things that she's discovered that are actually true. And so the other thing about Amy's book, Preyed Upon, is that her situation was one that a lot of people didn't they put blame on her. You know, if you're a child and you're abused, you
Yeah.
know, the other thing that I thought was really interesting when I read your bio. I don't know what I
I'm
keep
sorry.
hitting. I'm sorry.
I know.
So,
I'm just,
anyway,
it made me laugh.
You know what
there.
it is? It's a space bar. That's why I was hitting.
Yeah.
So anyway, it wasn't my mouse. Sorry. So anyway,
that's funny.
Little glitches.
That's the beauty of life.
Yeah. She was saying that there were people that put them on the same level. And
yeah, that happens.
Yeah, and so they were equating actions with her actions because she was an adult. They felt like, you know, she was.
Yeah, that happens so many times anymore.
It was just a relationship, and she said, you know, when there's an imbalance of power there's no consent.
Yeah,
and
consent. You know, I don't know if you remember this from the book, but I had an experience like that in my healing too. There wasn't a sexual abuse, but one of my therapists very definitely manipulated and emotionally took advantage of me. And I was clueless to it. I really was. I mean, it took me years to really realize. I mean, I ended up not continuing to go to him, but it wasn't because of that. It was, and details of that in the book, I'm not going to go into it, but it happens because of that power imbalance. And you're as a client, a patient, you are very vulnerable, and there's a trust between you and the therapist that is that a therapist that doesn't have good boundaries basically can take advantage of. And you know, that happened to me as well. So it does happen. So you have to be very careful, and you do have to listen to the counsel of the people around you. And because people were, I mean, I know you didn't like him. And when you read the book, I didn't like him.
I was the alpha reader, so I was like making comments as I was going through.
Yeah.
Like
Carla was one of the beta readers for my book, and I just love her little notes in the margin because she was like, I don't like him.
Yeah.
But and that was, you know, my daughter did not like him either, right? Because he just, but I didn't see it because I was, you know, basically very dependent upon him. So it does happen. So you have to be very careful. If people around you are telling you, that's not necessarily right, you probably need to take a step back and think about it. So absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was our second interview, we did one at the end of April last year on identifying predators, and you talk a little bit more about some of the red flags there. So if you're interested in that, then go and watch that interview. But you know, the thing is, I think this is common, like the therapist wouldn't even acknowledge he did wrong. He just was like, no. It was so horrific. But I think what's more horrific is knowing that that's not even unusual. Like, her experience
it's really
is not unusual.
Absolutely not. No, it's not. And you just have to be careful, and you have to really talk to people and listen to what they're saying, and have someone else in your life that you can be open with about what's happening in therapy, right? So that someone can just say, no, I don't really think that's a good plan. And then you just have to be open to hearing that. So I'm glad that book is out there. I think it would be very good for people to read. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I linked to if you go to the Amazon list for this live stream, if you click on the link, if you're not watching on Amazon, the book that's linked to is the Kindle version. And for some reason, when I was trying to add it to the idea list, there is a print version, but it wasn't up. So both are available. You can get. But what I was going to say was really, she actually did tell a friend, and because the friend was friends with this deacon / counselor, they dismissed it.
Yeah. And that happens too. Yeah. Which, you know, I think that's changing, but that's a whole nother interview. So in fact, we did one on that last year too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but yeah, we don't
So I
want
have,
to go there.
I have a playlist
Yeah.
of all these videos. But anyway, it was just, I really think you
Yeah.
should. Again, all of these, I think it's, even if you're not, we wanted to have a list of books that would be helpful for survivors. But I also think that if you have not personally experienced it, you still need to read these books, because you need to know and understand what people are going through. And that book, it's like,
Yeah.
it's almost, it like makes your skin crawl as you're reading it, because you feel it. You feel this
Yeah, and that's
manipulation
yeah.
that
And I
he's
think
bringing her through.
And I think, for those of you, I think there's been a few people that have kind of been with us through this whole thing. We had no idea how long this was going to be, but I think,
No.
this is a very important topic, and I hope people don't click off of it because it's long. Because I think, one of the things that I did not have when I was going through my healing were resources, because it was a brand new topic. And it was in the 80s when there was a lot of exploitation of, people saying they'd been abused and all those things. So it was very difficult for me because there were not good resources. And so I think it's worth the time for people to be watching this and, and not do it's over 10 minutes, so I'm not going to watch it. I mean, I really hope people will stick around and watch it, because I think the other thing that we're kind of highlighting, which I think is vital, is that sexual abuse is not reserved to children. And abuse in itself is not reserved to children. This happens to adults. This happens, and the trauma is, there is no abuse that's worse than someone else's, because whatever you experienced is your experience. And all of these resources will help you in your healing process. And I'm just very excited that we've got such a plethora of resources and we've been able to talk about it, because I think it's just so, so vital. And so I hope people will watch it, the whole thing, even if they do it in segments, because I think it's very important.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that in there.
So when we're talking about these books, I will say that personally, unless if you're like writing something, you need to read a bunch of books like this all at once, I would highly recommend spacing them out.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I read
like
a whole. I read a whole bunch of them for last. I did a series of interviews and videos every week. It was. I don't know. I mean, it's. I don't even like to say this because just reading about it, it does not even compare to somebody experiencing it. And the least you can do is listen to somebody's story about what they've gone through. But it was rough getting through all of those books at so condensed all at once. And so
and not only that, if you're a survivor, I would not even recommend trying to read one of the books in one setting. Yeah. Because it's, I don't remember how long. I don't think you did that with my book. I think you had to do it in segments because it's so intense.
I did like 3.
You can't really do it. But, and even with the little breaks that I put in there, it's really just hard to read. So,
yeah. And I don't know if if knowing you made it harder to read or it made it easier. I don't know. It really upset me. It really upset me. But
I think it was because you know me. So yeah. Go ahead.
My mom
I'm sorry.
said, I sent it to her and she said, I just cried. I went home and I cried. So it's tough. So anyway, but the next books that we're going to be talking about are a couple of books about by a person that actually kind of raised the spotlight on. I mean, not that the spotlight hasn't always been there, but this was a situation that really kind of blew up the entrenched apathy about it. And that is, I'm not sure if I can get the name right, but the one book is How Much is a Little Girl Worth by Rachel Den Hollander. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right.
I think that's correct, yeah.
And then her second book is What is a Girl Worth? And different versions. So I'm this is on Charlotte's list of suggestions, and so I'm assuming this one is for children. Is that right?
Yes, the first one's
What
for
is the difference
children, and
between the
it's
two?
really about
Okay.
helping children little girls realize their worth, right, and who they are, and
Okay.
that they're valued, and that they're loved, and basically building them up so that they, when something does happen, they know that they deserve more than that, or if something does happen, and kind of building them up. That's the general premise of that book. So yeah, it is a children's book for sure. Do you want me to talk about the other one?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so
So yeah, this is for big people, right?
yes, for big people, that's funny, but yes, it's for adults. Yeah, the second book that you showed is actually Rachel's story, and a couple weeks ago I saw a webinar where she was interviewed by the Trinity Forum, and I was really blown away by what she shared and how she shared it, and so it kind of piqued my interest to read the book. Now I have not yet read it, but I have read the part of the Kindle free sample, and I probably will. And I plan to buy it. But like I said, I really had not been that. I hadn't followed the whole story that closely, but Rachel is one of the first people, or actually is the first person that made an outcry against Larry Nassar. And for those of you that don't know, that he is the physician that treated gymnasts with Gymnastics USA for many, many years. And, you know, it was the story that started the hashtag Me Too movement, and allowed a lot of gymnasts to come forward. And so she was the catalyst for that. And so what is a girl worth is her story about that. And as I was reading over that this morning, actually, I was reading it, and in the first part of the book, she really lays the groundwork of the fact that she was raised in a very loving family. She was raised in a Christian family. She was raised to know her worth, and she also was raised to know the difference between love and abuse, because she shares an experience with a neighbor, and her parents were just really good at explaining things that happened in her life and laying that foundation. And so I think she's telling a story, and it's written in first person, and she's just telling her story. And she, in those early chapters, is laying the framework for what happened later and what was going on in her mind. And in the webinar that I watched, she just talks about the importance, it's particularly in the churches, of the message that churches give regarding abuse, and not so much the policies and procedures. And I don't want to go a lot into that, but it's the message. The message that the church needs to be putting out very publicly is that it will not be tolerated, and that it will not be covered up. And by doing that, they kind of keep potential perpetrators from even walking in the doors, because they know it's not going to be tolerated, and that if someone makes an outcry, it's going to be believed. And that was the whole issue that she talks about in the book, is that the fear of not being believed. And I think her foundation, she's an attorney now, and in the video, or in the interview, she was very, very adamant about her faith and how that helped her through that whole process of disclosure and resolving it and healing from that type of abuse from a person who was a trusted person. And, she shares an experience that she had early in life with a physician, and how her parents laid the groundwork of what a doctor was, and how that interaction should be. So she had the framework to understand that what was happening to her wasn't okay, but yet everybody around her was saying, it's just, whatever, right? It's just part of it. So I think it's a good book for to help survivors realize to trust your instincts in those kinds of situations and to not be afraid to disclose. And I think that's the biggest thing about it, is to have an environment where it's safe to disclose. And I think she just raised the awareness of that, and with her disclosure, and then just with what she's done since. And she's actually got a new book coming out. It's another children's book. It's what's a little boy worth. So, and it's on pre-order on Amazon as well. So,
okay.
and she talked about that in the video, so that's how I knew that. But yeah, it's on pre-order right now. So
that's one thing that Amy Nordhus said when I interviewed on her about her book Preyed Upon, is that she said it's not only the trauma of the abuse, but a lot of times it's trauma of telling.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Her doctor is just okay. It's believable. I mean, things happen. It's just sickening that these things happen. But anyway, he was allowed. It's a little bit of spoiler, but actually it's in the news, so it's not blowing her books. Just a book. But the medical board allowed him to relinquish his license. I think that's how it was. She talked to it in the interview. She said the reason was because they didn't. It was either allow him to turn it in or go to trial and take it. And the reason that the board did not want to go through the trial was because they had another doctor where they had 10 accusers, and by the time it got to trial, they all out, and the doctor just walked. So they just wanted to, and she was a single person making this complaint. She was not the only person this doctor did this to, but she was the only person that was trying to hold him accountable, and so he was allowed to turn it in. And I was like, could he go somewhere else and practice in another state? She's like, I don't know. I think he could. So
I don't know how that works, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just it's difficult to disclose. It is, and it's difficult but it's getting easier. I do have to say that, it is getting easier, but the downside of that is, and I don't want to go off on a rabbit trail, but I think the downside of that is that because it is easier to disclose, you really do have people that make false accusations. And so it's very important that, it is important to believe someone when they say it, but it's also important to be able to distinguish when someone's just making a false claim to get back at somebody or to make somebody's life miserable, and when it actually did happen. And that's a process, and it takes skilled people to really be able to discern that. So, and that's like I said, that's a whole nother topic that we don't need to go into, but it's important to be able to feel safe disclosing if you've been abused. I mean, I think Rachel does an excellent job of talking about how that happens, how the abuse happens in those kinds of situations of being vulnerable. So, yeah.
Well, I will have to get that book and read it too. It's been a few months since I read one, so I think I'm ready for it.
You think you're okay, to do it again, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I may get into it and say, no, can't do this because it's hard for me to read other books about abuse. It really is still.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway,
Well, we have been talking about our 10 books that sexual abuse survivors should read, and I'm sure YouTube is not going to promote them for this. So if you know somebody that these would be useful for, please share it or send it to them or mention one of these books. So anyway, the first one on the list is Charlotte's book, What Kind of Love Is This? And this is her memoir about how God rescued her from some very horrific upbringing. He brought her through it. The second book is Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, and this is about how trauma impacts our health and our body. And the subtitle is Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. and we talked a little bit about how when we go through those situations, it really affects our spiritual health, or not spiritual health, but our physical health. Okay, and then the third book is Courage to Heal, a guide for women survivors of child and sexual abuse by Ellen Bass and Laura Davis. This is a book that Charlotte said really helped her as she was beginning her healing. And she also mentioned that there is a version for men too, because it's, abuse doesn't just happen to women. And the fourth book on the list is Reclaimed by Shannon McGrath. And the subtitle is Overcome Trauma and Gain Healthy Control of Your Life. This is, I want to say it's her book, and she has two others that tell her story about, her younger life as she, and the abuse that she went through. And then the second book, Exposed, is her book that talks about how that trauma impacted her family life when she was an adult. But this book, Reclaimed, is sort of a workbook about how the process of healing, and this process is the same process that they use in her ministry, Hopeful Hearts Ministry, where they have peer mentoring and peer support. Okay, and then the fifth book is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend. If you have not read this book, you definitely need to get it. The subtitle is How to Say Yes, or When to Say Yes, How to Say No to Take Control of Your Life. And having good boundaries is very important, and I recommend this for everyone. So the sixth book is Life's Healing Choices by John Baker, and it's Freedom from the Hurts, Hips, and Habits. And he is he passed away. He was a founder of Recovery, and this is a book that if you have something that's keeping you from healing, this is something that helps you walk through it. And then number 6, Celebrate Recovery, 360 Daily Devotionals. If you need little bits of encouragement throughout the year, this is a good devotional book to get. And it is co-authored by Johnny Baker, and Mac Owen. And I'm not doing good at highlighting here on Amazon. So the book is a book called Preyed Upon by Amy Nord Hughes. And this is her memoir of how her therapist abused her. And it's a really good illustration of how the grooming process happens for adults, which I think is an area that, there's a lot of books about sexual abuse and grooming and identifying it, but I think that this is an area that isn't as well covered as others, I think. And then number 9 is How Much Is a Little Worth by Rachel Denhollander. And this is her children's book, or book for girls, that helps them recognize who they are and their value. And then the last book on the list is What Is a Girl Worth by Rachel. And this is her story of what happened to her and her recommendations for helping this not happen. So, Charlotte, do you have any last words for us? We've been literally, she called me yesterday and she said, "How long do you think this will go?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe an hour."
And here we are at an hour and 45 minutes. So, yeah. Oh well, yeah. That's okay. I think I think this was good. This was very encouraging, and I think that individuals who watch it will get some benefit, even if they just watch in segments. But I just think it's a great opportunity to create a library, whether it's for yourself or for, if you're a pastor or a social worker, these 10 books would be an incredible addition to your library to be able to read for yourself, but then be able to share with individuals, friends and family members, and just have them ready, available, or even just have a playlist to have resource list. So I just think we've covered a gambit of different kinds of situations. And I think there's pretty much something for anybody that has experienced any kind of trauma to find a resource that will fit their need. So, yeah, thank you for having this idea. It was just kind of a spur of the moment thing we kind of decided to do. So, yeah, but it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. The backstory of this was I got approved for Amazon Live, and I have replays of all these interviews that I've done, but you can't do those on Amazon Live. And so I was like, okay. I said, do you want it? Let's just do a top 10 list. And so this was like just a few days ago, and we decided.
Yeah, we just kind of threw this together. So it was kind of like, okay, yeah, I guess we could do that. That'd be great. I mean, she called me about something completely different, and
yeah. Actually,
so it was.
Yeah, but I think the important thing to remember, the saying is, when you know better, you do better. But you can't do better until you know. And
exactly.
It's easier and more comfortable just to, if this isn't your problem, just to sit in your own little world and, not have to deal with it. But it doesn't make things better. And as Christians, we're called to be the light, and we're also called to, help the poor and the oppressed. But also, we need to have a heart for people that Jesus has a heart for. He said he's come to heal the brokenhearted, right? And so people who have been through trauma and abuse are the brokenhearted. We need to be caring for them too, and not just leaving them in their
exactly. And I think I think one of the things that for me is important and that I try to get across on my YouTube channel is, I realize very clearly that God and faith are difficult for some survivors. And so I think that and a lot of the books we've talked about have incorporated that. And I think what's important, as I said earlier, is that if you're not a believer, I think my encouragement would be to give it a chance and consider it as a possibility, because it will definitely add to your healing experience in a positive way. And so these books, pretty much all of them incorporate this to some extent. And I think that speaks to the importance of faith in the healing process. So I just kind of like to close with that. Absolutely.
That's like I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of books out there where people tell their story, but there aren't as many, if those and there's no good ending, then it's really easy to become hopeless and think that things will never be
exactly.
And the books on this list are ones that are telling you, that will show you that that's not true. It doesn't have to be the way that it is. Things can be different. And
exactly.
Jesus came so that we could have peace and have joy, and that is a state of being. He came so that all of these actions, we can be free of them. We don't have to be put in a cage that someone else has made for you. Both Shannon and Amy talk about that. You can be free of that. And so anyway, if this list has been helpful, again, you can Charlotte times she's actually way more consistent about posting on her social media channels than I am. Her website is charlottethomason.com. She does chats with Charlotte. She does monthly live streams, and also I was gonna do this again. This kind of came up in the past few days, and my time has not. I haven't gotten all the details together yet, but we're going to be doing a virtual event on April 9th, and it's going to be called Restoring Hope and Celebrating Resilience. And this is going to be just, again, raising awareness about the situation. And I hope it will not only where we can share stories so that survivors can have hope, but that it will motivate people who haven't personally experienced it to care and to see where they personally can make a difference. That was one of the things that Shannon said about her ministry. She said the hardest thing is, everybody wants to help, donate to help cure cancer, but telling somebody a story, you have to tell a story about, sexual abuse, and people cringe, and it's harder for her, she feels, to raise money for her charity. So anyway,
Yeah, it's
that's gonna
hard.
be
Yeah. I'm looking
so
forward to
anyway.
that. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you've been hanging out with us the whole time being quiet, thanks for watching. And anyway, we are going to, if you haven't followed or subscribed to any of the channels that you're on right now, go ahead and do that, and be on the lookout for more videos coming on. Charlotte's going to be back with me on, I can't remember the date. It's the last Sunday in
February
the
27th.
27th.
Mhm.
Okay, it's a Sunday. And
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about, it'll be a little bit different. We're going to be talking about Devoted by Dean Koontz. So
Yeah.
it'll be a different topic.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Yeah. I did finally get
I
the
wrote her
book,
in.
so I am going to read
Okay.
it probably this week. So yeah, it'll be different.
Yeah.
A little challenge for me because that's a little out of my comfort zone. But yeah,
No, it's interesting. It's
yeah,
I don't think
it'll
it's
be
going to be
good.
what you expect. Yeah. So
Probably
if
not, but it'll
anybody
be
else
good.
wants,
Yeah.
wants to have a chat with us, get it now and read it, and then we'll have a discussion on the 27th. So
Okay.
anyway,
That sounds great.
thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye.